I never thought betrayal could come from the two people I trusted most. My wife and my best friend. But when I found out she was carrying his child, my world didn't just fall apart. It burned. Welcome to Amelia's Stories. Here we share real experiences about love, heartbreak, and the kind of betrayal that changes people forever. If you're new here, stay with us till the end, because some truths are stranger than fiction. Ethan Cole was a simple man from Oregon, a hard-working construction foreman who believed in loyalty and effort. He'd been married to Lila, a nurse, for 8 years. She was kind, warm, and the kind of woman who could light up a room just by walking in. At least that's what Ethan believed. His best friend, Ryan Porter, had been around since college. More like a brother than a friend. He helped with house repairs, joined family dinners, and was always there when Ethan needed him. Life looked good from the outside. A steady job, a loving wife, and a loyal best friend. What more could a man ask for? But lately something felt off. Lila started staying late at work. Her phone was always face down. Ryan came by too often, always with the same excuse, just checking in. Ethan brushed off the unease, telling himself he was just tired. But deep down he knew something wasn't right. Sometimes betrayal doesn't crash in. It creeps in quietly, hiding behind familiar smiles. It started with small things, tiny cracks in what used to be a perfect routine. One morning, as Ethan drove to work earlier than usual, he saw a familiar truck parked down the street. It was Ryan's. At first he brushed it off. Maybe Ryan was visiting a neighbor or running errands. But the next week he saw it again in the same spot around the same time. Lila had also changed lately. She used to come home tired in her scrubs, her hair pulled back and her smile soft. Now, on the nights she said she had extra shifts, she left wearing makeup and perfume, the kind she used to wear only on their date nights. When Ethan asked why, she laughed it off, saying she just wanted to feel good at work. Their weekly hangouts with Ryan started feeling awkward too. Ryan, once talkative and full of jokes, suddenly seemed distracted. He avoided eye contact, always glancing at his phone, and left early with vague excuses. Ethan's younger sister Megan noticed it too. One evening she quietly told him, "Something doesn't add up, Ethan." But when he pressed her, she just shook her head and said, "You wouldn't want to hear it from me." That night Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was losing his mind, or if the truth was standing right in front of him, disguised as the people he loved most. One evening, while searching Lila's purse for her car keys, Ethan froze. There, tucked between her wallet and a folded receipt, was a small ultrasound photo. At first he smiled. Maybe she had planned a surprise announcement. But then his eyes caught the date printed at the top. The scan was from a time when he'd been away on a construction project for 6 straight weeks. His heart dropped. When he confronted her, Lila's face paled for a split second before she forced a smile. "It's from an early checkup," she said quickly. "They just used an old date on the printout." Her tone was too smooth, too rehearsed. Ethan wanted to believe her, but the math didn't make sense. After that day, everything felt different. Lila grew distant, avoiding his touch. Ryan barely looked him in the eye. Every time they were in the same room, tension hummed like static. Ethan found himself second-guessing every word, every glance, every unexplained moment. Sleep became impossible. The thought kept looping in his head. What if the baby isn't mine? Finally, one sleepless night, Ethan made a choice. He went into his home office, unscrewed a corner of the bookshelf, and installed a small hidden camera, something he'd once used on job sites for safety checks. He hated himself for doing it. But trust had already been broken, and deep down Ethan knew, whatever truth that camera captured, it would change his life forever. When Ethan finally sat down to watch the footage, his hands trembled. He told himself he was being paranoid, that he'd find nothing but silence and shadows. But as the video played, his world collapsed. At 11:47 p.m., Ryan appeared in the doorway, looking around before slipping inside. Minutes later, Lila joined him in the living room wearing one of Ethan's shirts. Ethan leaned closer to the screen, his breath uneven. Their voices were soft but clear. Ryan's words hit like a hammer. "He still thinks it's his, doesn't he?" Lila nodded, whispering, "He'll never find out." For a long moment Ethan couldn't move. The sound faded, replaced by the pounding of his own heartbeat. He replayed the clip again and again, hoping it would somehow change, that maybe he'd misheard, that maybe it wasn't real. But it was. His wife. His best friend. The child. Every piece of his life had been built on a lie. When he finally told Megan, her face turned pale. She hesitated before whispering, "Mom and we had a feeling. We didn't know how to tell you." That confession hurt worse than the video itself. The people he loved most had chosen silence over truth. Ethan sat there for hours, staring at the frozen screen, the image of Lila and Ryan locked in betrayal. Anger burned through him, but deeper than that was a hollow ache, the kind that changes a man forever. Ethan couldn't sleep. The footage had burned itself into his mind, but the betrayal didn't end with Lila and Ryan. A gnawing question kept him awake. How long had his family known? That morning he went straight to his mother, Janet, determined to get answers. She was in the kitchen, pouring herself a cup of coffee, her hands shaking. When she saw his expression, she knew the confrontation had come. Ethan's voice was low but firm. "Mom, how long?" Tears welled in her eyes. We've known for months," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "We thought she'd end it. We thought you'd fall apart if you knew the truth." Ethan felt the floor drop beneath him. Months. They had let him live in a world of lies while they hid everything to protect his feelings. The anger that surged wasn't just for the affair. It was for the silence, the deceit, the betrayal of trust he'd placed in them all. But he didn't scream. He didn't rage. Instead, he retreated to the solitude of his own thoughts, isolating himself in the quiet of his home. The betrayal of his family cut deeper than any lie Lila had told. As he sat alone, he began to plan. Not out of revenge yet, but for clarity, control, and survival. Every detail, every step had to be precise. Ethan understood now that lashing out wouldn't fix anything. Instead, he would move silently, letting the truth unfold on his terms. This was his life and he was taking it back. Ethan moved through the house like a ghost, careful to hide the storm brewing inside him. Around Lila, he smiled faintly, nodding at her stories of work and errands. Around Ryan, he laughed at jokes, offered help with tools, and even assisted him on a small home renovation project. Measuring, hammering, painting, pretending nothing had changed. Both of them, in their arrogance, assumed he was too distracted by work to notice anything amiss. Behind closed doors, Ethan was methodical. He quietly changed the locks on every door, making sure only he had the keys. He transferred money out of their shared account, ensuring that Lila couldn't touch a single dollar without his knowledge. A lawyer handled the details of a private DNA test, ordered discreetly to confirm what he already feared. Every move was calculated, every smile carefully placed. Lila interpreted his calm distance as stress from long hours on the construction sites, while Ryan, though uneasy, couldn't quite put his finger on the tension. He sensed a presence in the air, a warning, but dismissed it, assuming Ethan's demeanor would eventually return to normal. Inside, Ethan's mind raced with every scenario, every possible outcome. He wasn't acting out of rage, not yet. This was patience, strategy, the slow, careful tightening of control. He had been betrayed, but he refused to be destroyed. The house, the finances, the truth, they were all his to manage. The air was thick with unspoken tension, and both Lila and Ryan would soon realize that appearances could be deadly. The envelope sat heavy in Ethan's hand as he entered Lila's family dinner, a quiet storm beneath his calm exterior. Everyone chatted, unaware of the tension simmering beneath the surface. He set the envelope on the center of the table, sliding it forward so all could see. He looked first at Ryan, whose eyes widened in instant recognition, and then at Lila, whose smile faltered as she sensed something was wrong. Ethan's voice was low, steady, carrying a weight that silenced the room. "You both made your choices. Now face them." Lila gasped, her hands trembling as she picked up the envelope. She hesitated before opening it, and the expression on her face changed instantly. Shock, fear, and shame all mingled together. Ryan's face went pale. He tried to speak, to justify, to explain, but his words stumbled and fell flat in the heavy silence. The rest of the family froze, staring from one to the other, unable to process the sudden revelation. Murmurs and gasps filled the room as the truth settled like a dark cloud over everyone. Lila's tears fell freely now, her voice breaking as she begged, but Ethan didn't respond. He simply stood, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the door, each step deliberate and cold. No anger, no yelling, just silence that carried more weight than any words could. As he left, the room erupted in chaos behind him. But Ethan felt a strange clarity. The confrontation was over. The truth had been laid bare and he had regained control of the one thing that mattered. His own peace. That night the house was quiet, heavy with the aftermath of the confrontation. Ethan moved through the rooms with deliberate calm, carrying a toolbox like any normal homeowner might. He stopped at the living room wall where their wedding photo hung. For a moment he stared at the smiling faces, memories of better days pressing against his chest. Slowly he lifted it off the wall, setting it aside. Then he went to work. One by one he changed every lock in the house, making sure no key of hers would fit. Each turn of the wrench felt like reclaiming a piece of himself, a silent declaration that the life she had betrayed him in no longer belonged to her. Hours later Lila returned, exhausted and desperate, her voice trembling as she called out his name. She rattled the doorknob, hope in her eyes, only to find it wouldn't turn. Panic rose in her voice as she banged on the door. Ethan appeared on the other side, calm, composed, and finally unshakable. "You can keep your lies," he said quietly, his tone steady, "but not my home." He walked away, leaving her outside, the cold night air sharp against her skin. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt a strange mix of grief and liberation. The betrayal had scarred him, but the control he had regained, the act of shutting the door on deceit, gave him a clarity he hadn't felt in years. Alone in the house he finally allowed himself to breathe, feeling both destroyed and at last free. Weeks turned into a blur for Ethan. Ryan packed his belongings and left town quietly, the weight of his actions hanging over him. Word had spread about the affair, and his reputation crumbled faster than he could have imagined. Lila moved in with her sister, carrying the pregnancy alone, the house they once shared now a symbol of what had been lost. Ethan focused on himself, seeking therapy to untangle the knots of anger, betrayal, and grief that had taken root. Each session peeled back layers he hadn't realized he was carrying: pain, distrust, and the heavy disappointment of those he had loved most. He took small steps every day, repairing fences, rebuilding friendships, and slowly reclaiming his sense of normalcy. During a quiet afternoon, Megan approached him, hesitant but sincere. She confessed that she had known more than she let on, that she had tried to protect him from the truth but had been too scared to act. Ethan listened, anger softening into understanding. Slowly their sibling bond began to repair, built now on honesty rather than pretense. Yet even with progress Ethan couldn't unsee what had been done. The images, the lies, the betrayal, they lingered in the corners of his mind. Still he faced each day with resilience, learning to live alongside the memories rather than be consumed by them. Life had fractured, but piece by piece he was putting it back together, stronger and more cautious than before, determined to guard his heart and his peace. Months had passed since the confrontation, and life had begun to settle into a new, quieter rhythm for Ethan. One evening he received a message from Ryan, apologetic and desperate, asking to meet and make things right. Ethan agreed, choosing the old bar they once frequented, a place filled with memories that were now bittersweet. When Ryan arrived, his nervous energy was palpable. He stumbled through apologies, explanations, and excuses, but Ethan listened without interruption. There was no anger in his eyes, only a calm clarity that Ryan couldn't read. Finally Ethan leaned back, his voice steady and unshaken. "You didn't just take my wife," he said quietly, letting the words hang in the air. "You took my peace. I'm taking it back." He stood, placing cash on the table, and left without another word. No shouting, no confrontation, no threats, just indifference. That was his revenge, sharper than anything he could have done in anger. Later, Ethan sat alone on his porch, the evening breeze brushing against his face. The house was quiet, his mind clearer than it had been in months. He reflected on the path he had walked, from suspicion and heartbreak to careful strategy and eventual freedom. Sometimes he realized revenge isn't about violence or pain inflicted. It's about reclaiming yourself, protecting your peace, and walking away from poison. Alone yet whole, Ethan felt a sense of closure. The betrayal had left scars, but for the first time in a long time he felt in control of his life again, ready to face whatever came next without fear or regret.